Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth on YouTube. Let's talk a little bit about music publishing. It's been hot on the internet for the last couple of years, and in the media, there's been several artists that have been selling the publishing. Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, Nelly, and several artists of that kind who have recently been selling their music publishing. Well, let's talk a little bit about it. What is your publishing? Well, your publishing can be your annuity for the rest of your life. It can be your retirement plan if you're an artist. As we all know, that artists in the music business don't have a retirement plan. They're basically independent contractors. And your music publishing is part of your royalties, and it's your intellectual property if you are the creator of it. And that's very important. One of the beauties back when rap music was created, there was a gift and a curse. The gift was that most of the rap artists wrote their own songs, wrote their own raps. So they had a writing publishing credit for that. However, there was tons of sampling that was on the production side of the music. They didn't get any publishing for that, and they had to pay out substantially for sampling. That makes a big difference between the artists from Motown, the artists of the 60s, the James Browns, the Kool and the Gangs, the Isley Brothers, who are the most Earth, Wind, and Fire, who are some of the most heavily sampled artists and groups of our time. They created their own music. So, and they wrote their own songs. Fleetwood Mac, and The Police with Sting. And that makes a huge difference versus rap artists. So when people give the comparison that Nelly sold 50% of his publishing for $50 million versus a Justin Bieber or a Taylor Swift, who sold their publishing for several hundreds of millions of dollars, a lot of people don't know that Justin Bieber plays several instruments, writes some of his own songs. Taylor Swift definitely is kind of the female Prince of our modern day time with songwriting and production skills and playing instruments. Artists like Prince, who was self-contained, who did everything. That was the big difference between Prince and Michael Jackson. If people can remember, even though Michael Jackson was in the music business a lot longer than Prince, he didn't have the control that Prince had. From a publishing standpoint, Michael Jackson didn't write a lot of his songs. They were either co-written or they were written by someone else, and he definitely didn't produce any of the music. Where Prince wrote all of his songs, and he was the producer of all of his albums from day one. That makes a big difference on a long-time publishing career. Your intellectual property, being able to license your music. You don't have the power and the control to license that music because technically you're not the creator and owner of it if you didn't write the songs or produce the music. That's what separates Prince from Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson. Even though they may have sold more records than Prince, that doesn't mean that they had more control over their content. And that's very important for an artist to understand. What should they do with their publishing? Also, the most money you're going to make at the height of your publishing is when the record is hot. It's based on the number of spins, how long streaming, how often is that song used or being played. And of course, you're going to maximize that height when the song is hot. And then over the years, that kind of dissipates. It's no different than in the movie business. When a movie is hot, the actors get paid the most, and as that movie takes its course over the years, their royalty check diminishes over time. So a movie that was hot 30 years ago and you don't see it in rotation as much anymore, those royalty checks for those actors is not as much as it used to be. However, in the music business, it's kind of the same way. It is the same way. Uh, so you're going to maximize your profit margins when that song is hot, and over time, it slows down. Well, from a publishing standpoint, if you own the content of the music, if you were the creator of it, like Sir Mix-a-Lot with Baby Got Back, he produced the music and he wrote the song. Sir Mix-a-Lot has made over $100 million since that song came out and was created, because it's been sampled and recycled over and over. Nicki Minaj, several artists have used portions of that record. But it was his creation, and he was an independent artist that had a distribution deal. So you have to look at your complete situation on whether you should keep your publishing or sell your publishing. But I think one of the key factors is, did you create the music? How much of the publishing do you own? If you own very little of it, for example, take the song that Diddy. I think P. Diddy's biggest record after Notorious B.I.G. died was Every Breath You Take. He sampled Sting's Every Breath You Take, and it was his number one record. But guess what? He did not pay and did not ask and have the acceptance to use that sample in that song from Sting. So Sting just waited around, and Puffy never made $1 off of that record. Sting made $50 million off of that record. Sting's music has been used in several songs, and Sting has been living off people sampling his music for the last 25 years. A group like Fleetwood Mac has never sold their publishing to my knowledge. James Brown's music has been sampled heavily. However, he did not own his publishing. You remember, black artists signed some of the worst deals in the history of the record business back then. Had he owned his own publishing, even though he was the creator, he would have had hundreds of millions of dollars. And also remember with Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's income and his net worth didn't become exorbitant and reach $500 and $600 and $700 million until he owned the Beatles and the Elvis Presley publishing catalog. So publishing is, if you want to build net worth, publishing is where it's at. And so one has to think about, is that worth taking a chance to sell it now or keep it forever, or try to sell it at a premium? That is the key factor. Puffy was able to make a lot of money because he owned all the publishing on his artists on his roster. Him giving them their publishing back today, where it has very little value, means absolutely nothing. That's part of the uproar with a lot of the bad boy artists today. But you take somebody like Taylor Swift. Remember, Scooter Braun was able to sign her to a deal where he owned most of the publishing, and he sold it, and she was upset about that several years ago. But remember, she also signed when she was like 15 years old. I don't think they really knew her parents. Evidently she didn't have great entertainment legal representation, because she should have been able to control her intellectual property and her creative content to a certain degree without Scooter Braun being able to sell all of it. But it was a great learning curve for her, but she still has been able to do well. But someone like Whitney Houston, there's not a whole lot of publishing that was there for her to live off of. She didn't write her songs. Clive Davis always had other writers for most of his artists. And that's one part that I didn't like about Clive Davis. He knew, as a Harvard lawyer, entertainment lawyer, how to keep the money in his pocket and in his record company's pocket versus the artists. They didn't have a lot of creative control. So remember, your publishing is your intellectual property. Going back to Whitney Houston with the Dolly Parton song, her biggest record was I Will Always Love You, or something like that Dolly Parton wrote like 40 years ago. When that record hit number one, who do you think recouped or cooped or made all of the money? Whitney got a few points on the record, but the publishing was owned by Dolly Parton. That's why Dolly Parton, who has written all her records, the older version of Taylor Swift, is worth $600 and $700 million today. You have to be the creator. A person like Dallas Austin, Jermaine Dupri, who writes and produces, Teddy Riley, those guys that can go into a studio singularly and create all of this great music, they have the intellectual property and the copyrights and the publishing to those songs. A guy like R. Kelly, I know he's not the most popular person in today's time, but was a prolific writer. He should own tons of publishing if he didn't sign a terrible record contract, which it sounds like he did, because he's always complained about the record company taking advantage of him. But somebody like R. Kelly, who's very similar to Prince, somebody like Tupac Shakur, who wrote prolifically, even though he didn't produce the music, but from a publishing standpoint, the writer's part of it, he would obtain all of that money. Now Nelly is a very interesting situation. He had a lot of hot records that had a great buzz and great hooks. If he actually wrote those hooks and wrote those records, I don't know if I would have sold my publishing, half of my publishing, for $50 million. Nelly has the kind of career, if he was the content creator, where he will be able, where movies and other folks will use part of his hooks and his jingles, so to speak, hot in here, for commercials, for movies, and he could continue to get paid at a premium price. I think Nelly had a certain talent and a certain gift with his hooks that you will see them, there's no expiration point on them. Kind of like Baby Got Back with Sir Mix-a-Lot. So I'm not so sure, unless Nelly's financial situation isn't what we think, that he saved any of his money, and what was his record deal like. Maybe he needed the cash, but he is a gentleman that's in the rap era that I don't think should have necessarily sold his publishing. As you see, Eminem hasn't sold his, to my knowledge, and you talking about a very prolific writer and a very smart guy. Jay-Z, I don't think has sold his as a prolific writer. But guys like Dallas Austin and Jermaine Dupri, who can go in the studio, produce the music, not use a lot of samples, and also write, they haven't sold their publishing. So it depends on, one has to look at what side of the coin are you on. Did you create it, or did you use a lot of samples? As I said, some of the most heavily sampled artists and groups of all time have been black artists. James Brown, Kool and the Gang, Earth, Wind and Fire, the Isley Brothers. The Isley Brothers wrote a lot of songs for Elvis. A lot of people don't know the Isley Brothers came out in the late 50s. Ron Isley and them were musical geniuses. Motown, a lot of that music was original music. So when it's sampled in rap music, they have to pay Motown first. So if you're going to be in this music business, try to stay independent, be creative. Content is king. Understand intellectual property is intellectual. Intellectual is creative. It comes from you and your heart, your soul, and your mind, and it's your property. It's your physical asset that you can commodify. So we need to understand that as young artists. That's your creation, that's your baby. So trying to have a basic understanding of where you stand, where your foothold is, how much power do you have, is no different than this new internet social media space. As content creators, it's the same thing. Whether you are YouTube and you're trying to monetize it, Instagram, Facebook, if you have created it, it's your intellectual property. So you can sell it, you can license it, you can come to a mutual agreement on it, but it's yours, it's your content. So be a content creator. The world is moving into that space. We're going to have to be way more creative. There are not these 30-year jobs, 40-year careers anymore at one company. This social media aspect and all these platforms with TikTok and Instagram and all these other YouTube. Try to be creative, but understand the business side of it. Understand there's an intellectual part and there's a property part. The intellectual is your existential and your philosophical aspect of it, and your property is what you actually take from that creation and make it something physical, and you can monetize that. So stay conscious, stay aware, manifest your truth in the right way. Please continue to follow me on YouTube under the Trevor Donald Experience. Hit the like button and the notification button. If you like the stuff that I'm saying and the information that I'm giving you, please share it with individuals. And I also have a podcast called the Trevor Donald Experience on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Buzzsprout.